News. This is a breaking news alert.
With the Mercer family, and we are all hoping for the same outcome, and that is to save and rebuild the centerpiece of the old market. Let me thank the Omaha Fire Department for its immediate response on Saturday afternoon, ensuring the safety of the residents and employees of the building and working in extreme weather conditions to control this fire. Other departments, police, public works, and our building inspectors and our planning department have provided continual support to this operation. As this investigation moves forward, our primary concern must be public safety. Here today with me is Omaha Fire Chief Bernie Kanger, and Chief Kanger was on the scene Saturday to direct the operation. And thank you, Chief Kanger, for your leadership. Assistant Fire Chief Dan Olson oversees the Fire Investigation Unit. Jay Davis, Superintendent of the Permits and Inspections Division. And from Public Works, Director Bob Stubbe and Traffic Engineer Murthy Cody. And our City Attorney Paul Kratz and Planning Director James Thiel are also here. Let's begin with Chief Kanger. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon. I'd like to begin by expressing our sincere regrets to the employees, occupants, and owners of M's Pub and the residents of the apartments damaged or destroyed by the devastating fire. Secondly, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Old Market community and the residents of the City of Omaha for their support during this event, specifically Hyatt Place, Scooters, Upstream Brewery, and Subway. These businesses, along with many others, provided shelter, food, and hot drinks for our crews while we worked in some of the most adverse conditions that I've ever encountered. I also want to thank the volunteers from the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army for your presence and support while we battled this severe cold. We could not do it without all of your help. On January 9th at 2:51 p.m., Omaha fire crews were dispatched to a possible explosion in a building at 422 South 11th Street. The first arriving crew was on scene at 2:54 p.m., or 2 minutes and 48 seconds after they were dispatched. Upon arrival, we encountered fire coming from the basement of the building on the 11th Street side, and we could smell natural gas. A working fire was declared at 3:04 p.m. Our initial priorities were to rescue and clear the building of all civilians, contain the fire, and prevent fire extension. To that end, crews entered the building and searched apartments on the second, third, and fourth floor and declared the building all clear. Keep in mind, during that operation, they had a working gas-fed fire below them and heavy smoke conditions on the second, third, and fourth floors. It made it a very challenging endeavor. A second alarm was requested at 3:43 p.m. MUD arrived at 3:16 and terminated gas service to the structure at 4:28 p.m. Due to the fire conditions and extreme weather, a third alarm was declared at 7:26 p.m. The roof of the building collapsed at 10:30 p.m. and parts of the first floor of the building had also collapsed into the basement of the structure. The fire was declared under control at midnight, and it took approximately 60 firefighters to help control this blaze. Every day we have 174 firefighters on duty, so for this particular event, approximately 1/3 of our entire force was committed to fighting this fire. One occupant of the building suffered a laceration and singed hair while exiting the building prior to our arrival. This was an M's Pub employee that was trying to enter the basement in order to shut the gas off when they had detected a gas odor. That employee made it to the top of the stairs when the explosion occurred and had suffered some minor injuries. They were transported to Nebraska Medicine. Later that evening, we also had a firefighter that suffered a broken hand after falling on the ice. This was after the fire was declared under control, and while we were trying to manage hot spots, this occurred approximately 2 a.m. in the morning. The fire building is part of a 5-building complex that extends from 11th Street to the west. The fire building and the building directly to the west of it, which we would call Building 1 and Building 2, are part of an exclusion zone where we are not allowing any civilians, residents, occupants to enter due to the potential for collapse. The utility service to the buildings to the west, which would be 3, 4, and 5, have been restored and occupants allowed to return to the structure. That began yesterday, and to make note, that's approximately 36 hours after this major fire. So with the efforts of a lot of city departments, we were able to get the occupants in 3 of those structures back in operation and back into their businesses relatively quickly. Finally, I'd like to thank Jay Davis from the City Planning Department, as well as members of our Public Works Department and their vehicle maintenance staff. They were on scene with us that entire evening, refilling our apparatus with fuel, providing maintenance to apparatus that were having mechanical issues due to the extreme cold, and Jay Davis was providing intelligence reports to us with regards to the layout of the structure, helping us make tactical decisions with regard to how we were going to fight the fire. With that, I'd like to introduce Assistant Chief Dan Olson, who was our Operations Section Chief the night of the fire, and he's also leading our fire investigation unit.
Good afternoon. Not quite as young as Chief Ganger, so I need my readers. I'm Daniel Olson. I'm the Administrative Assistant Chief. I am the ultimate supervisor of the Fire Investigation Unit. The unit consists of 7 full-time investigators on a rotating 24-hour shift. They report to one battalion chief who reports to myself. Responsibility of the Fire Investigation Bureau is to conduct sound and legal fire investigations into the cause and origin of any fire within city limits, including this fire. Our goal at this investigation is to conduct interviews with related parties and to compare that information with the information that we ultimately uncover at the scene when we are able to enter the area and conduct our scene investigation. I'd like to explain what the fire investigators have done up to this point. We've conducted many hours of field interviews. We've scheduled follow-up interviews. We photographed the scene. We'll be processing those photographs and comparing that to the evidence and the testimony in the interview process. And we've reached out to several agencies for assistance. At this time, I'd also like to thank the Planning Department, the Public Works Department, Douglas County 911, and our local ATF agent, who's also a trained fire investigator. Moving forward, this investigation will consist of holding the scene to maintain the chain of custody so that we can follow up with our field investigation process. We are going to be working with the Planning Department to determine the safety of the structure and the surrounding area, and once that is evaluated by the structural engineers, we'll be able to enter, and our overall goal is to determine the most probable cause of this fire. With that said, I'd like to mention and ask for your patience during this process. This could take several weeks to determine the structural stability of the property itself and to ultimately go in and conduct a sound and legal investigation. I am going to ask you folks for your patience, and I assure you that as soon as this investigation is complete, I will release as many details related to the incident and the most probable cause of this fire. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Jay Davis, who is our Chief Building and Code Inspector. Jay?
Thank you, Mayor. We were called in. I actually sent my Chief Building Inspector down initially to help the fire department assess what was going on, how we could move through the buildings. As the night escalated, we obviously, both my Chief Building Inspector and myself, ended up being on scene, working with the fire department to determine the best way for them to enter, get in, and try to attack the fire. It was a big fire, and it was a darn cold night, too. So none of us wanted to be there, but the good news is the building did stop where it was supposed to at the firewalls. And because of that, it didn't go any farther down the block. Had it gone down the block farther, it might have been a whole different situation we're talking about today. So what's happened since then? Well, obviously the fire investigators have control of the scene. We're working very closely with them. Today I worked with the insurance company for the Mercer family. We have created a fence zone that's going to be going up probably as we speak right now. It's going to be the middle of Howard Street, probably most all of 11th Street right now still. We've got some issues to work with in the street. And then down the alley as well, so that nobody can get into the building or around the buildings at this time. Now, people are going to start to ask, when can we let people back in the building? The number one building, as we call it, the one in the corner, that's going to take a long time for us to determine. Depending on what some things happen with the insurance company in the next few days, we'll know if we can start to safely let people back into the second building, which is the condo building, the restaurant, and the niche store. So we're working with them. Obviously, working with the fire department, we have a very good working relationship, and we try to keep that way. Both of us shared information over the course of the fire, which probably made it a much better situation than what it could have been. So with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
All right. And next, I'd like to introduce our Public Works Director, Bob Stubbe. And if you want to bring Murthy up, too.
Thank you, Mayor. The chiefs have already mentioned Public Works involvement with regard to the activities that have taken place while the fire was going on. What I want to address is with regard to the work that was going on down in that particular area. There is a project that was being done by Verizon, which is their small cellular antenna technology project. They have a contractor, Unite Private Network, that is installing the fiber optics for that particular technology. They have hired a contractor to actually do that installation work. They have submitted to us, and we've been working with them related to the project that they've identified. We have some drawings that we will provide to you. And they've hired a contractor to actually go through and install that particular work, and the contractor has also submitted to a permit to the city to actually do work within the public right away.
Murthy, did you want to? Okay. All right. All right, that is what we have as far as a briefing goes.